Namir, everybody. My name's Shelley Morris, and I've been coming to Garma forever. And I'm privileged and honoured to be a part of the youth forum for the past 5 years, working with all the Jamakuli and working with wonderful artists like Emma Donovan and Naomi, I don't know her last name, Winnetong, Kutch Edwards, and of course dubs and some diesel dub mob. So we wrote a song together and we were going to perform it tonight, and because some of our crew here from Galawinku, they've got to fly out, so we wanted to perform it in front of an audience. And it's the whole theme of Garma is that Balanda ga Yulngo Balarali, bookmark together, we're working together for a better future. And if we forget our young people, we're not going to have a future. So, we're spending time with young people, raising their self-esteem, because once our children have a good self-esteem, they can go on and change the world that they live in. Thank you. I'm going to invite Sienna up. She's going to interpret the song so you can understand it. Ma.
One of the parts in the song is Loko Martina Wangaina, and so Loko means foot, so Martina means so walking, and Wangaina is like home, so walking back home.
Loco Wasn't that just absolutely sensational? Another big round of applause for all the kids. Amazing. I would now like to welcome to the stage Deputy Chairperson of SNAKE, the National Body for Aboriginal Children, Geraldine Atkinson, along with Ken White and Nova Paris.
I thought they were really fantastic. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Gumatj clan being traditional landowners of the land on which I'm standing on here today and doing this presentation. And I'd like to also acknowledge the other Yolngu clans of North East Arnhem Land as well. And I really would like to acknowledge the youth group who have just performed. I think they did a really wonderful job, and it's been really great that they consented to be a part of our, presentation of launching the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day. I also wanted to say just thank you very much to the Garma Festival organisers for agreeing to launch National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day this year. When we heard the staff and the board, they were just so excited that a forum such as this would want to participate in that for us. So we really appreciate and thank you very much for the privilege to do that here today. And that it's sort of being a part of launching the day and the annual celebration for our children and our families. And today, hundreds of other local events are being held across the country to show our children that we care about them and that they hold a sacred place in our families and our communities. National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day first began being held in 1988. It was held to celebrate our children and acknowledge the many parents, carers and early childhood workers who are helping to raise healthy, resilient children and preparing them for school and the challenges beyond that. National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day has given us the opportunity to reflect and raise awareness on serious issues impacting on the wellbeing of our children and their families. Each year we've had a different theme, and this year in 2014, the theme for the day has been it's Kids in Culture Strong, Proud and Resilient. Themes over the years have underlined the importance of culture and cultural connection for the health, wellbeing, development of our children and our young people. And this is the main message that I want to convey today. The core importance of culture in the development and education and in child protection, which is what I will talk about, take a few minutes to talk about. The first National Children's Day in 1988, held as a part of the protest during the bicentennial celebrations, was a rallying point to voice the increasing concerns of Aboriginal child welfare agencies about the high removal rates of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their culture. In fact, the first few themes for Children's Day were strongly worded calls for action on these high removal rates. My agency, the Secretariat of National Aboriginal and Islander Childcare, which is known as SNAKE, was proudly at the forefront of the movement that called for a national inquiry into the systemic and forcible removal of our children from their families. And it would lead to the inquiry by the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission into what became known as the Stolen Generations and the Commission's 1997 Bringing Them Home report. The report provided recommendations to help heal the trauma of families affected by the policies of removal and avoid the mistakes of the past. Just fast forward us today, and there is a disconcerting sense of deja vu, in part because of that inaction by governments to implement the Bringing Them Home recommendations. A modern version of the stolen generations is unfolding, with an explosion in the number of children coming into contact with the child protection system and being removed from their families. The sobering reality is that since 1997 and Bringing Them Home, the numbers of children, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, in out-of-home care has increased by 400%. And the numbers have spiralled upwards even since Kevin Rudd's national apology in 2008. And that included reference to a future in which, he said, to a future in which this Parliament resolves that the injustices of the past must never, never happen again. In June 2013, there was almost 14,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care, accounting for a staggering 34% of all children in protective care across Australia, despite comprising just 4.6% of the child population. Our children generally spend more time in out-of-home care than any other children and have a precarious chance of staying connected to family, community and their culture. State and territory child welfare authorities have an obligation to provide culture care plans for children, but few fulfil their obligations. Family and cultural connection is important for every child, but for the most vulnerable children, those in out-of-home care, it is absolutely critical that they know their mob, their country, their stories, and where they fit in life. So speaking about the high number of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care here in the Northern Territory and without cultural plans, colleagues have told me that right now hundreds of Aboriginal children are effectively lost in the system without identity, without family and without a voice. She could have been speaking about anywhere in Australia really, not just the Northern Territory. Today, the motives for removing children may be different to previous times, but the impact on those children, their families and their communities is just as devastating. And what will be the legacy for our future generations when these children become parents themselves. Clearly, urgent action is needed to stem the tide of our vulnerable families coming into contact with child protection. Really, a new approach is needed, one that looks to identify children at risk at the earliest possible stage and that provides more support for our vulnerable families. In Australia in 2013, $3.2 billion was spent on child protection and out-of-home care and just $664 million on early intervention and intensive family support services. Governments need to redress or even reverse this imbalance. Our former Snake chairperson, Muriel Bamblett, noted that governments are spending a lot of funding picking up children and families after they've fallen off the cliff. So what are some of the ways we can look to support our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander vulnerable children and families, many of whom face multiple levels of trauma and stress and disadvantage and marginalisation? Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and organisations must be given a voice and more meaningful participation in the often complex decisions on their children's future if we are to avoid the harrowing injustices of the past. Snake has long advocated that the key to change must be the empowerment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to care for their children through Indigenous community control of services, design and delivery. New South Wales provides a promising example of a groundbreaking new approach to developing the capacity of Aboriginal out-of-home care agencies through partnership with mainstream organisations. Government and the NGO sector in New South Wales have agreed that all out-of-home care placements for Aboriginal children will be transitioned to being supported by Aboriginal agencies. The number of out-of-home care placements by Aboriginal agencies grew by 71% in the first 12 months of the transition, providing that the capacity is there if the correct processes is followed. While this growth is promising, my colleague Angela Webb, CEO of the New South Wales Aboriginal Child Welfare Peak Body, has described the need for parallel investment in these services to provide early intervention family supports that not only out-of-home care. Across the country, there has been promise in the development of 38 new Aboriginal child and family centres, beginning work to provide critical integrated early years focused family support in some of the most disadvantaged communities in Australia. Evidence is clear that supporting families early in a child's life has a huge impact on their outcomes later on. But tragically, these new centres, set up under a $300 million COAG partnership agreement, has become a political football between states and the federal government. The centres were set up to enable local Aboriginal leadership in providing child and family support services, including early years education and care, parent support and health services. And some of these Aboriginal child and family centres have only just opened their doors, but many are now languishing with their funding slashed and a lack of planning for their long-term sustainability. The 38 centres and the other 270 Aboriginal community-controlled early years services across Australia have a crucial role to play in our children's development, in getting them ready for school and in closing the gap on Indigenous disadvantage. Our early years services are community hubs, focus points for the delivery of integrated services and keeping community members connected. Our services immerse the children in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures every day. It isn't an optional extra or observed just on special occasions such as NAIDOC Week or even a day like today. Cultural and community connection is very powerful when it comes to children's learning, self-esteem, their identity and their belonging. And I speak from personal experience. I run a centre in Shepparton, which is called Lola's Children and Family Centre. That's in Victoria, in the Goulburn Valley. We set it up. It's named after my mother. But we established it because our community had recognised the significant disadvantage facing our children because of their lack of attendance in early years programs. And from day one, the intention was to provide a holistic service, including long day care, occasional care, playgroups, cultural and community education programs. We also provide a bus which collects children and their carers. That this service could be affordable and could meet the needs of our Aboriginal children and families. And Lola's and every other early years service provide a link for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children between home, community life and school, and are very distinct from other mainstream services. So much is known about what is needed to support Indigenous children and families in the early years, but we keep missing the mark on an effective response that empowers communities to support their kids and their families. There's also been a promise of the growth of intensive family support services that help families in crisis to stay together. Last week, representatives from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community-controlled intensive family support services gathered in Sydney. At a meeting, these services from around the country shared the incredible difference that they were making in the lives of their Aboriginal families. One service from New South Wales reported that they had kept 97 out of 110 kids at home and 47 of the 52 families together that had come through their service. The service leaders also described that they were thin on the ground, struggling to meet high needs in their communities, receiving referrals too late and operating in small pockets of the country rather than having broader coverage. The potential of our early years services and family support programs to make a difference in our children's life, to make them proud, keep them resilient and strong, it's not recognised enough by governments. Our community control services provide the ultimate prevention and early intervention. And I say to governments that you should support our services with increased and long-term funding, and then you will see the benefits for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. SNAKE is at the moment running a national campaign with other major agencies in the child welfare sector to reduce the alarming number of our children in out-of-home care. And this campaign is called Family Matters. Kids in Culture, Not in Care, and has held major forums in Darwin and more recently in Perth. And so far, we have heard that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families feel powerless in dealing with the child protection system. They are fearful of it, it doesn't listen to their needs, and it doesn't understand cultural differences, including traditional child rearing practices, which at times is leading to children being wrongly removed from their families. To conclude, what I've described in this speech are some glaring problems that can be overcome and can improve the outcomes for our children and their families. But it will take a shift in approach and a rearrangement of resources by federal, state and territory governments. And clearly we can't talk about better outcomes in child protection or early childhood development without raising the need to tackle the underlying factors that place multiple stresses on our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families that lead to the risk of child neglect or abuse. And I think we all know, and we all say, and people probably say, oh, there you go again, but it's factors such as intergenerational disadvantage, and it's about marginalisation, and it's about poor housing, and it's about family violence, and it's about drug and alcohol misuse. And these have presented and continue to present great challenges to our communities. But if we don't rise to the challenge together, will the Prime Minister need to rise in 20 years' time and offer another apology to the lost generation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children? In finishing, I'd like to pay tribute to the many thousands of Aboriginal parents, carers and workers who, despite the obstacles, are doing a great job in raising healthy, strong, proud and resilient children. And I'd like to acknowledge the well-meaning, dedicated child protection and family support workers striving for a better future for our children who are at risk. I'd also like to acknowledge the great work that the SNAKE staff who are dedicated to their work, who were so proud to be a part of this festival and so proud that we are launching today, National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day. But I'd like to say to all of those people that I wish them and all of you here today a happy National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day, and let's make sure that we just keep in mind those children that I've mentioned. Thank you very much.
Geraldine, thank you very much for the words of advice that you've put forward. I always find it fascinating that when you talk about an outcome of $3.2 billion spent on the end result as opposed to being put into prevention and intervention strategies that are focused on family and focused on keeping children within their home environment. And when I was asked to talk today, I thought about the birth of my two sons. I was at both. Aaron was a normal birth, although we nearly lost him, and the doctor said to me, you have to make a choice as to whether it's your wife or your son that survives. And I said, I won't make that choice, you do the task that we want you to do, and he did. And Aaron was born alive and well and no injury from a birth that could have been difficult. And the second one was Brendan, who kept turning in the womb and wouldn't turn around. Every time the doctor turned him, he turned around and had to be he was breech. He wasn't coming out. So I watched a caesarean. But the thing that went through my mind when I held them both was that as an adult and as a parent, the protective arms that you put around a child, that you bring to you, that you nurture. And when you watch them grow, you hope that the journey is the same for every child in this country, but we know that it's not. And I want to acknowledge the work of SNAKE because I've known people in SNAKE for a long time, and Geraldine, I certainly knew your mum well. She was a very close friend. And her work on this issue and the early years of schooling played an important part in shaping the thinking of many governments along the way. But we've still not reached a point in which we can tick off and say that we've got it right. That's why I read with interest Andrew Forrest's report on the early years. There is still much to be done. And I looked at the young people on the stage today and wondered what their journeys and pathways will be for the future. Because I would hope that their journey is one of optimism, one of fulfilment, and one in which they enjoy a quality of life to where they are not subjected to those negative aspects of life that we often hear about. And certainly my commitment to Snake will remain. My commitment to you and the work you do and the team that work with you remains. But the other part that I also want to commit to is to continue to be an advocate so that the early years of a child's life is much better and much richer. That we reduce the number of people that need to be taken out of home and put into care. Because in the two departments I've worked in, or the two professions, both health and education, I have seen the numbers increase slowly over the years. But the interface between both agencies was always problematic. The lack of sharing information, the lack of working together because people work in silos. With children, we should take away those silos and continually work in a partnership, collaborative way in which we ensure that they are safe and secure. Where there is a problem in a home, we shouldn't say, let's take them away. What we should be doing is looking at how we help a mother who may be experiencing family violence in a context in which her own safety is often at risk. Or a family in which there are other factors that come into play. Because some 10 years ago we did that with the 10 most vulnerable families in Perth through a program called Manguri. And we combined 8 different government agencies and we wrapped the services around those families, and it made a difference. They weren't taken out of care. They weren't put into care, they were left with their families. But the services that were provided ensured that they had a nurturing environment, attachment to their family and their siblings. I've seen too many, because my mother was part of the stolen generation, too many Aboriginal young children removed, and then you see the latent or subsequent consequences of a removal from the attachment of a mother and a father. And I remember times as a young person on a payday watching alcohol-fueled violence and thinking, I wish alcohol didn't exist, because you wouldn't have the payday events that used to occur. But even in that circumstance, as an older sibling, you looked after your younger brothers and sisters, and we were never removed from each other. And it wasn't my mother or father, it was other members who are relatives that used to come around. They'd have a card game and play cards, and then the alcohol would become a problem. But I know that and there were 10 of us altogether, if the 10 of us had been separated, we would not have the bond of love that we have, or the bond of the strong relationships. And that's why we have to work to ensure that our children aren't removed from their families, but only in those circumstances where we can no longer refuse to act on behalf of a child, because we shouldn't allow a child to be subjected to something that is, in a way, denigrating to the wholesomeness of them. And I want to say that if all of us continue in the journey that Geraldine has outlined, and we continue to work together as a community and wrap our arms around those who need the support, because I know that if I go back 40,000 years ago, our families were cohesive units. The father had a role in the family, and so did the mothers, and so did all of the skin relatives by skin group. So it was a nurturing environment. Times have changed. But congratulations on holding our National Children's Day here. I think it is an incredible setting. We have people who are like-minded in both the essence of what they've gained out of these few days, but also for us to see the young people that were on stage singing and the smiles and the beauty of that. So congratulations, Geraldine, and certainly you and I will continue to walk together in the work that needs to be done. Thank you all very much.
My name is Jack Peris and I'm 10 years old. Today is National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day. I'm delighted to help launch this with my mum today here at Garma. This is an opportunity to celebrate us kids and also reflect on the obligation we all have to ensure all of us children get the best possible start in life. This year's theme is Kids in Culture, Strong, Proud, Resilient. It is very important that us children learn about our culture, and it is very important that us kids are strong, proud and resilient, because if we have those three attributes, then we will emerge from childhood ready to face the world. In the modern world, there are many distractions, but passing on our culture must always be a priority. Learning about culture helps keep us children safe.
A third of all children in care in Australia are Aboriginal, and ensuring that these children learn about culture is very important. It helps them to have an identity and it helps them have pride and self-esteem. Sadly, in the Northern Territory, it is not a good time for Aboriginal children in care. We have seen children in care take their own lives this year, and it is tragic. Child abuse notifications are increasing, but investigations are dropping. The response from government has been to cut funding. Morale in the department is low, and with huge vacancies, the workers have massive caseloads. And when child protection workers have spoken out to the minister, he has called them liars. It is not right, and today I do want to take the opportunity to state my appreciation for the work that they do and point out how valuable it is. The work that Snake undertake right across the country to assist Aboriginal children in care are just so vital, and I commend them for the work that they do. We are also seeing massive cuts at a federal level to programs including the Aboriginal Children and Family Centres, and other things like the new GP tax will also hurt Indigenous children. As we all know, the other critical issue for our children is early education. The recent Forest Review highlighted this, as have many others. Over the last couple of years, there have been 38 Aboriginal child and family centres that were set up around the country. These centres are exactly what we need. These centres provide a one-stop shop, not just for early education, but for health services and family support services to make sure our kids get the best possible start. The centres build Aboriginal leadership and employment and increase families' capacity to respond to child and family needs. Sadly, these centres are now operating under a cloud of uncertainty and stress, with a standoff between state and federal governments over who will fund them.
It's time to walk the talk and commit to funding these community-led early childhood services so that us children can have the opportunities to be leaders of tomorrow. Happy Aboriginal Children's Day. Let's have a round of applause for the leaders of tomorrow, us Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children.